You'd be amazed at what you can learn about how to succeed on the drums simply by observing a 2.5-year-old. The truth is, if you've been dealing with slow progress and not reaching your goals, feeling impatient, frustrated, or discouraged, then you need to hear these 3 brilliant lessons from my daughter. I'll share with you these 3 steps to better drumming so that you can overcome whatever obstacles stand in your way and make some serious progress on the drums. You can do this. Hey, welcome to The Non-Glamorous Drummer. Glad you're hanging out today. I help beginner and intermediate drummers become the musicians that others want to play with and have in their band by teaching you the core, fundamental drumming skills that get you results faster. And hey, if you are a beginner drummer who is needing to build coordination so that you can play what you want to play on the kit and make everything feel more effortless, then I have a special free gift for you in the description. This is my 30 days to 4-way rock coordination for the beginner drummer method. This is just a PDF e-guide that lays out, here's exactly what you practice on day 1 and then day 2 and then day 3, so that before you know it, you have built some solid rock coordination that'll allow you to play your favorite songs and allow you to learn songs much more quickly. Work through this guide and you're gonna find that you know exactly what to practice each day. You can practice confidently because it's a step-by-step system. Your work is cut out for you. You now know how to build the coordination. You've just gotta do it each day. Play syncopated patterns with ease, be able to improvise your own creative patterns, and glue your grooves together with autopilot left foot timekeeping. This is good stuff. This is gonna help you have so much more fun on the drums because everything's gonna get easier. So go grab it. The 30 days to 4-way rock coordination guide for beginner drummers, totally free in the description. All right, let's get on with today's lesson. Here we go, 3 brilliant lessons from my daughter, also known as 3 steps to better drumming. These are huge, hope you're ready. Let's dive in. Number one thing, be a sponge. You may have heard this kind of saying before, being a sponge, absorbing information like a sponge. Let's break this down a little bit. So my daughter, 2.5-year-old daughter, her name's Hannah, is always asking questions, constantly observing and just soaking everything in. And that's what's so cool to watch. Any of you who have had kids, you've watched those young kids as they're learning to crawl and walk and do different things. They're just soaking in the world around them. They're watching everything you do, so no pressure as a parent. They're watching everything that you do. They're learning from you and from everything around them, soaking in everything. That's how they learn at a crazy pace. Our problem as adults is that our brains are crowded. It's hard to focus, and I think it's a combination of, when you grow up, there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of life obligations. If you're a parent, there's a lot of responsibility there. You've got work, you've got all these things going on that you feel like you're juggling, and it's very difficult to actually put yourself in a mental space where you can learn the drums or learn anything in the same way that a toddler is learning things. It's very difficult to do that. And I don't know if it's truly possible to be able to do that, but we can try to set ourselves up for as much success as possible here so that we can learn, absorb like a sponge, and master our instrument more quickly by learning it the way a toddler would. Here's what I'm getting at. Create a dedicated time and space for learning and prioritize this time and stick with it. Now, I know you know this kind of thing. I know that you know if you're gonna master the drums, you have to make time for it. But as a step beyond that, here's where I want you to take action. Because learning keeps you moving forward. Set aside a time not only for practicing, but also for learning. Because these two things are kind of different. Like, yes, they can go hand in hand. But when I say learning, I mean listening to music, like listening to a band or a drummer that inspires you. Maybe watching somebody's clinic at PASIC. There's so much great stuff on YouTube. Yes, it can become overwhelming, but find some people you want to learn from. Maybe this channel is one of those things. Hopefully my videos help you out a whole bunch. And so this can be a place where you learn. Anywhere where you can learn what you really want to learn. And so have a dedicated time and a space for that sort of learning. Maybe you're taking lessons. That's awesome. Taking lessons from a local teacher. That's unbeatable. So, okay, there is your learning. But set aside a regular time to watch some videos, listen to some music, actually learn about your instrument, learn about the music that you're wanting to play. Then separately, you've got your time set aside for practicing. And of course, practicing is learning too, because you're teaching these things to your brain as you're playing. You're working on motions, you're working on techniques, you're working on coordination. But think of it as those two separate things. The reason why this is so important is because learning is what keeps you moving forward. It's what keeps you motivated. I found this to be so true in every area of life. If I'm having trouble being motivated about something, then all I've got to do is dive into a book or find some good YouTube videos on the topic. Or like, let's say you're wanting to learn about some event in history. Let's say you're in school and you're needing to learn more about something that happened in history. Find a really good documentary about it. You watch that documentary and suddenly it's more interesting and you're more motivated to learn more about it. And so when you're able to prioritize that learning, you get more motivated, you get more of that incentive and you get more of that capability to internalize things and to learn and to move forward. So that's a big deal. Be a sponge. Set aside time, not just to practice, that's a given, but also to learn. So maybe, let's say you've just got 30 or 40 minutes a day. So 15 to 20 minutes, you're learning. You're listening to a couple songs. You're watching a particular video that you feel like is really helping you out a bunch. And then you're practicing. You're sitting down at the kit. When you have that well-rounded system there, that's going to keep you going day after day. You're going to look forward to that time, and that's key. Lesson number 2, repeat things over and over again, often very, very slowly. This is a tough one. Hannah says new words over and over again. Like when she figures out a new word, she figures out how to pronounce it, she'll just say it over and over again. She'll repeat new actions over and over again. Anybody if you've had a toddler, you know that game where they'll go pick up a toy from one room and they'll carry it over to another and like stack it over here, then go back and get something else, put it over there. It's this back and forth repetitive thing that we as adults, we're like, this is so boring, this is so monotonous, how are you so entertained by this? But that's how kids learn, by doing these things over and over again, and it's so fascinating when you're doing it for the first time. And so that's something that fascinates me watching Hannah, how she'll repeat these things over and over again, and she'll even ask the same questions over and over again to make sure she really knows the question. She'll ask us something and we'll tell her the answer, and then she'll just ask the same thing again. Like she wants to make sure the answer is still the same, and she wants to make sure she remembered it right and that she fully understands that answer so that then she knows it, she internalizes it, she remembers it. I think that our biggest issue as adults is that we're somewhat lazy in this department, and we're definitely very impatient because we live in a world where everything's instantaneous. We want to just have information just downloaded into our heads. If that were possible, so many of us would pay huge amounts of money to have information downloaded instead of having to learn it. We have a hard time being patient with learning because, like I said a few minutes ago, our brains are crowded. We feel like we've got so many responsibilities and not enough time. And so the idea of repetition and in doing things over and over again, it's like, man, that's so tedious. I don't want to do that. There's got to be an easier way. There's got to be a shortcut. But most of the time in drumming, especially when it comes to building coordination and building comfort behind the kit and mastering your instrument, there's no shortcut. It takes time and it takes that repetition. And so you have to have that dedicated patience of, all right, I'm going to do this over and over again in the same way my toddler is going to repeat this task over and over again, say this word over and over again until she says it right. Ask this question over and over again until she knows the answer. That's what I got to do on the drums. I've got to work this over and over again, very slowly and methodically until I know it. So here's your action with this one. Choose one specific thing you've been struggling with. You can think of it right now. Is it a coordination exercise? Is it a technique? What is something on the drums? What motion, rhythm, exercise, whatever, have you been struggling with that you can loop over and over again until it becomes second nature? So think of something. I know there are things out there. Something's going to come to mind if you let yourself sit here and think about this. What is something specific? One specific thing, not a whole bunch of general things. One specific thing that you've been practicing and struggling with, and maybe you just need to be more patient with it. Loop it over and over again. Go really slow, really thinking about what you're doing. Because that's the other thing. You've got to really pay attention to the detail of what you're doing and you're practicing, whether it's a motion, a technique, a coordination exercise, a difficult part of a song. If you're not really thinking about what you're doing, you're probably not going to fully master it where it can then, be shoved into the subconscious part of your brain where you don't have to worry about it. So be patient. Use repetition. Learn complex things on the drums the way that a toddler learns how to walk. All right, number 3 lesson that I've learned from my 2.5-year-old daughter. And this is a big one. I saved this one for last because this goes deep. This is something that that a lot of times we don't want to admit that we deal with, that we struggle with, but it's there. And so this is for somebody out there, if not many, many of you, because I know I've struggled with this too. So this is very important. This is something that you've got to work on and get past if you're ever going to really master the drums and have fun on the drums. So lesson number 3, make lots of mistakes. This is a difficult one because we don't want to make mistakes, do we? But let's look at a toddler. So my daughter Hannah operates without fear. So there's something right there. She operates without fear, and she's constantly trying new things, messing up, falling down, and then getting right back at it again. Even if it hurts, even if she scrapes her knee. It hurts for a minute, but then she's back up. And she doesn't fear running around on the driveway just because she fell one time. There's no fear there because she's just having fun, learning and growing. That's what's so cool about watching a toddler. And that's something that I think we lose as we get older, because we learn of all the things out there in the world that we can fear and some things that we should fear. There's healthy fear, there's unhealthy fear. But we develop this level of caution, and for some of us it's cynicism, and there are so many things we're afraid of doing, and so we develop beliefs about these things and about ourselves that might actually be limiting us and holding us back from really reaching our full potential on the drums or in whatever other area of life, you name it. Our problem, I think, is that we've been led to fear mistakes and avoid them at all costs. I don't know what line of work you're in. I've had several students who are engineers and who are super smart people. And that line of work, perfection, it has to be perfect, right? Because if you mess something up, if there's a line of code that's not right, somebody did the math wrong, then the satellite is going to crash. It's going to burn up, or it's going to leave the Earth's orbit. If the engineers working at NASA back in the 60s had messed up the math, then they would have sent the astronauts past the moon forever out into space and not come home. You have to get those things perfect. And so in certain lines of work, perfection is what has to happen. And so we've been indirectly taught that, well, everything's got to be perfect. We carry over that mindset onto something creative, onto an art form like the drums, and we assume, well, everything's got to be perfect. We can't mess up. What if people see us mess up? What then? Because we know what's happened in our past. We know what happened when we got that failing grade in school. We know what happened when we blew that test or when we made that mistake at work. And so we have all of this baggage that we carry into learning the drums. And those are things that really you can't carry into learning the drums, because this is a creative art. Like, this is an instrument. This is not engineering. It doesn't have to be perfect. And also, furthermore, the way that we learn the best is by making mistakes. When you fail, you could really learn a lot from that failure, because that sticks in your mind. You probably don't remember a college lecture from however many years ago, but you remember that time you failed at something in life and you learned something from it. Embrace the fact that mistakes will happen and that they are the absolute best teachers. Because I bet you can think of something now. I bet you can think of a mistake you've made somewhere in life and you remember what you've learned from it. Mistakes are the best teachers. So embrace the fact that mistakes are going to happen on the drums. If you haven't played a gig yet and you know that you want to play a gig, you want to play your first gig, but you're also terrified because you're afraid of messing up, know that those mistakes will happen. I don't think I've ever played a perfect gig. If I have, then I probably thought it was maybe perfect, and actually it wasn't quite perfect. There's so many times that I can count the mistakes by the end of it. Like, yeah, that wasn't quite right. Yeah, I should have played that differently. The more experience you gain, the better you get at hiding mistakes. That's true. But the mistakes are going to happen. You can't control whether or not mistakes happen. Mistakes will happen for musicians around you, and then you have to react to that and figure out, how do I keep the whole band together? These are things you get better at with time, but know that the mistakes will happen. Don't fear them. Embrace the fact they'll happen, because you can learn so much from them. The first few times I played with people, I made horrible mistakes and nearly train wrecked the band, but thankfully there was forgiveness and there was encouragement. And I was able to learn so much and get so much better in a short amount of time because of all those failures. It was like when I first started playing with people at my church when I was in high school. It was like I was a toddler, constantly falling down, skinning up my knee, hitting my face on a rock, getting dirt all over me, but picking myself up again and going, okay, so I'm not going to do that again. Let's try it this way this time. Learning, okay, making another mistake. Okay, I've sprained my wrist this time, but it's all good because I'm going to heal up and I'm going to figure out how to do this better. It's just that constant process of, falling down, hurting yourself, but you recover, you get back up again, and you learn so much quicker that way by that trial by fire. So do not be afraid of getting out and playing with people, which leads us to our action step here of, this is where the honesty comes in. You don't have to tell me this in the comments, but write this down just between you, just you. Write down the biggest fear you face on the drums. Are you afraid of messing up in front of people? Are you afraid of not being accepted by fellow musicians? Because I think when it comes down to it, if we're all honest, we're afraid of that rejection. There's a fear of rejection. We all react differently to that. We don't react the same way to rejection. But we all fear it in some way, and we all want to avoid it, right? We naturally want to avoid that because we want to be liked by people. Maybe we wanted to be cool in school, and maybe we don't refer to it that way now as, well, I want to be cool because that sounds silly. But we want to be accepted by people like us. We want to have status. We want to have social status, right? Be honest. Be honest with yourself. And so the thing we fear the most is making mistakes and failures that will lead us to not be accepted by the people we want to be accepted by. And if we want to be a good drummer, we want to be accepted by those musicians that maybe are well respected, that we look up to, And we're afraid that if we mess up in front of them, we're going to be rejected by them. It's all over. We haven't reached that status as a drummer. We can't call ourselves a real drummer because we keep messing up and we can't trust ourselves. That's a tough place to be. And if you're constantly fearing that failure and fearing that rejection, you're probably not going to go very far. So I want you to identify that right now. What is your biggest fear? Then, we're not done yet, because what I want you to do, once you've written this down, and once you've been totally honest with yourself, you've done some deep diving, some soul searching here, you've written down your biggest fear, or maybe 2 or 3 biggest fears on the drums. Now, I want you to think about this. How might you operate differently if you had no fear? If there was no fear, if none of that fear existed, what do you think you would be doing differently? That's where I want you to think like a toddler, because that's where it goes back to my daughter Hannah is operating without fear. She doesn't know what she ought to be fearing. She's not going to fear jumping off a 6-foot wall, which is why I've got to watch her as a parent, because she's just going to jump. She's just going to go for it and fly like a jet plane. She's constantly messing up, constantly making mistakes, and that's how she's learning, and how she's learning so fast. So don't you think that we could learn faster if we're not fearing mistakes? If we're not fearing how we sound as we practice, if we're not thinking about how our families are listening to us playing drums in the basement or garage and going, oh, he sounds so annoying, so obnoxious. I wish they'd stop playing because they don't sound good. Some of us worry about that, little mundane things like that. We're not sure what our family thinks. We want our family to be proud of us for trying something new, and we feel like they're not, and so we get stuck there. Anyways, write down what you're afraid of, and then think about, what would I do differently if there were no fear? Would I go play that gig? Would I go to that jam session? Would I volunteer to play at church? What would I do differently if there was no fear? And how much faster might I learn if I wasn't afraid of anything? I think that's something that sets apart a lot of the most successful people in the world. It's not that they're that smart. You know, when you look up super successful people, whether they're entrepreneurs or they've invented things, a lot of times the big common denominator isn't that they did well in school. They're super smart, because a lot of times these people didn't do well in school. Usually the difference is that they've either they're operating without fear, like they're not worried about it, they don't have fear, or they've just learned how to overcome it. They've learned how to deal with it. And so I think the most successful people that accomplish the most great things, they're operating without crippling fear. Yes, there should always be some healthy fear, like, you know what, I'm going to put on my seatbelt when I get in the car because I know how dangerous it can be out there on the road. So I'm going to put on my seatbelt. That's a healthy fear. But there are crippling fears, like being afraid of making mistakes on a gig. And that's something you got to move past. So I know we've gone deep today. I know we've done some soul searching. These are big things that have been on my mind and on my heart lately, watching my daughter grow. Any of you who have young kids can definitely relate to that. It's amazing what you can learn from watching your kids, and you see a reflection of you in them. It's very cool to watch, and you learn so much from just watching the way they observe the world and the way they learn from the world around them, and hopefully from you. So, no pressure. I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope you're inspired to do some deep diving and do some mindset work. I know this has been one of those mindset lessons where we're not doing any playing. We're not talking about technique or coordination, but mindset's a huge deal. And if you have these limiting beliefs holding you back, if you have flawed mindsets or philosophies about yourself and your drumming, you're not going to get anywhere no matter how many tactics I give you, no matter how many coordination exercises I give you, no matter how many techniques I teach you. You're not going to go anywhere if you're constantly believing that, I can't do it because I don't want to be rejected. So you've got to think about, what is that fear? What is it holding you back? Deal with that. Move past it. Be willing to make mistakes. Be willing to fail. And suddenly all the other things you're learning, all of the physical drumming things, are going to start to really come to fruition because they're no longer held back and crippled by fear. So go out, be empowered, be encouraged. You can do this. You can master the drums. You can conquer the fear. You can deal with the mistakes. You can become the confident drummer who has command over the kit and who has that power to drive the band. You can do this. You've got to dive deep, dig into that, and deal with that, because you're fully capable of mastering the drums. I believe in you. I hope you do too. So I hope this has been a helpful lesson. I hope this has been valuable to you. Be sure to go grab that coordination guide, talking about command and confidence over the kit. That's going to help you so much. If you work on that coordination, you build that up day after day, step after step, you're going to build so much confidence. And you're going to rule out a lot of mistakes. There's not going to be those dumb mistakes where you're in the middle of playing something and you freeze up. because now you've got command over your limbs. Coordination is such a big deal, so go build that four-way coordination. Even if you're a total beginner starting out, this is the guide for you. Go grab it in the description, totally free. All right, thanks for watching today. This has been a lot of fun. Hope this has been helpful. I'll see you on the next lesson. Stay non-glamorous. You can do this.